Now, we had heard reports about the Flyers being postponed as well, and then I got an interesting text from somebody with the Flyers that said, well, it's not official, but it looks likely, and that was at 4:15, Kevin Durso. So I know you had posted that the game is, in fact, postponed. Do we have any official announcement about that game being postponed?
We don't have an official announcement from the league that these games have been postponed, but at this point in time, I can't imagine that there's a game going on at 7 o'clock tonight. It doesn't seem like there's anybody going to the arena today. It feels like the focus was on what to do in regards to reworking the schedule, because it sure sounds like that there is no games tonight and no games tomorrow either, and this will resume on Saturday.
All right, so earlier today, we had kind of heard that the Flyers were not going to play, and then like you're saying, it's not official, but if they don't play today, what would be the fallout from that? Because the Flyers were supposed to play this a back-to-back. It puts them in back-to-back situation, and then the way the schedule kind of shapes up, I mean, it puts the NHL, which put them in double back-to-backs because they were trying to kind of rush this thing along. It would put them in a really interesting spot. You had back-to-backs today, and then you were scheduled to play again on Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I mean, you're not going to have them play 3 games in a row. So it looks like the NHL is going to be knocked off their timeline here.
For sure, a little bit. And I think there's a lot of people who are wondering now, based off of that, whether or not they stick to the regular schedule for Saturday, which had, I believe, the same 2 matchups at different times. I think the Flyers and Islanders were supposed to play Game 4 on Saturday at noon, and Vegas and Vancouver were supposed to play Game 4 of their series at 8 o'clock at night. So could they stick to those times and pick everything right back up where they were supposed to and just say it's Game 3 now? There's definitely some fallout from it in terms of reworking the schedule, because they're going to have to figure out whether or not they want to keep those days separate the way that they were and just move everything back 2 days. If there is another back-to-back thrown in there where they decide to stick that, I find it hard to imagine that they would actually put 2 back-to-backs in for games 4 and 5 and then for 6 and 7. I really find it hard to believe they're going to make these players try to play the 4 most important games of a series if it goes that far in 5 days. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So there's definitely some reworking that needs to be done with the schedule as a result of this.
All right, Kevin, obviously the NHL took a little bit of heat yesterday for not really now, the way that I kind of looked at this, and you might see it differently than me, I mean, you look at the NBC broadcast, Flyers, the Eastern Conference games anyway, made mention of what was going on. The Western Conference games, which are produced by TSN in Canada, they really did not. Now, some of the players came out; they were not happy that the NHL did nothing. And then today, it looks like all the teams. Now, when you look back at it and kind of reflect, should the NHL have done something yesterday? And are you comfortable with them canceling everything today?
I'll start with the first part, which is what the NHL did yesterday. And they had a moment of remembrance, or whatever they called it, in that first game, the Boston-Tampa Bay game that was in Toronto. It was shown. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. And then, to my understanding, there wasn't even one for the Colorado-Dallas game later on that night in Edmonton. There wasn't even a moment for that. And I think that had to do with already there was backlash from the way it went. Quite frankly, I was surprised that they even played those games last night, to be honest. I can understand why, in the middle of the Flyers-Islanders game that's going on, everybody's locked in that, and you can't really find a way to get that message to the players and get them out of that game mode. They're locked in, and it's really hard to figure out, you're not going to stop the game, I think, in that situation. But I did think there was enough time for something to have gone through the other locker rooms and to get that message to the other 2 games and start right there. They went ahead with these games, and that moment was not close enough to what they needed to do. Quite frankly, for me personally, as I was watching, and I'm different than the players in this sense, where I have the ability to be connected to the world outside a little bit. We're watching, we're tweeting during the game, things like that. So I saw what was going on, and with the NBA and what they were doing. And quite frankly, it's hard to get me down during a game. I started to not feel as interested in that game as it wore on because of what was going on around, and definitely didn't feel like I felt like I definitely didn't feel like covering a game today. That's for sure. In the sense that it just felt like there needed to be a break from this. Like there needed to be time for reflection to really try to do something with this. And it was disappointing to see so many other members, media members and things like that, talking about it doesn't feel like we should be here doing this for these night games that won, and they were anyway. And it kind of felt the same way today. And, so that's my response to that, is that I really think that this is a necessary thing to do, to take a step back, to not let this be the focus, to overshadow something that's bigger than the game. This is bigger than hockey, and we need to recognize that it is. And that's where I am at this point with this. I think we needed to do this. And, it's a day late, but I guess better late than never for the NHL, because they are at least doing something about it and taking the focus off of themselves by trying to play through it and putting the focus on a situation and an issue in the world that needs to be addressed.
I definitely agree. And I just wonder, I'm just looking at all different sides. So I do agree with everything you just said. But when you look at the NHL, you got plenty of guys that are Russian, Swedish, Finnish, Canadian. Does that have an impact on what's happening with the NHL? Like, do we right now, sitting here, know anything that's really happening in Sweden or Finland or any of these other countries? And I just feel maybe because of how you have so many different people in this league that played an effect on what was happening yesterday. Once again, not an excuse. I'm just trying to look at it from every angle.
And what you're partially correct, Broads, because here's the thing. We don't know what's going on in Sweden. We may not know everything that's going on in Canada. We don't know everything that's going on in Russia, all these countries where these other players are from. But if you have teammates from that country, you probably know a little bit more about their personal life and their home life and what's going on in their home country than the average person does, because you play with them all the time. To me, one of the biggest indicators of why maybe something had to happen with this, especially from the Flyers, is that your leadership group played how many years? Almost, 8 years with Wayne Simmons. And there's a guy who is directly affected by this, is on that founding group of players who founded the Hockey Diversity Alliance, who is out there promoting that message and trying to fight for equality. And you have to have some reflection on that. You played with this guy for all those years. You considered him a brother, and you can't shy away from this issue now because of the fact that he's no longer part of the team. Even a guy like Chris Stewart, who was on the team for basically all season, and kind of is a forgotten member of the organization now, in the sense that when Nate Thompson got traded to the Flyers, he took the jersey number that Chris Stewart had worn in earlier games, so it was almost as if he wasn't part of the roster anymore. But he's on this board as well. And to my understanding, Scott Lawton and James Van Riemsdyk were two of the players who helped initiate contact with this group of players. They contacted Chris Stewart and asked, where do we go from here? How can we help to bring awareness to this? They're leading the front on this, and I think that if you have connections with players who have to go through this, if you were a teammate with one of these players, then you have to have I think you have a responsibility to be partners in these issues and try to do something to help further the conversation, people who don't know as much about the situation. So I think that comes into play as well.
Yeah, and one of the messages that that I brought up earlier that we kind of discussed is there's a lot of people out there that have this, I'm not watching the NBA. The NBA is, dead to me. I'm not watching them anymore. So, unfortunately, the NBA not playing's message is not hitting all the right people. But if hockey doesn't play, all of a sudden, now you're hitting a different group of people, and I'm interested to see all those people who say they won't watch the NBA. Are they now going to turn their back on hockey? That's to me is going to be very interesting. That's why I think it's impactful that the NHL decided to do this, because the message hits a different group of people.
Yeah, and it makes you think. I'm a guy, like we've talked about this before, the hockey guy thing and all that stuff. But I love watching a game, and I'll watch any game that's on no matter what. It doesn't bother me whether it's the Flyers and I'm doing work for 97.3 ESPN.com or something like that, or if it's just a game I want to watch for my enjoyment. I got through with everything last night when the game was over and didn't have it on for the rest of the night. I didn't watch the two games last night, and I was finding it hard to try to get up for a game tonight in terms of feeling like there was a duty to promote the game when there was something bigger going on that was out there, not only in the world in general, but in the sports world too. Other sports having an impact on this. It's time that we step back and let that take the forefront here and not focus on hockey tonight. I think that it's not the time to have it, to watch it, think about it, and we need to either, personally for me, I feel like I'm going to need a night off from social media, because there are people out there who are like that, Mike, like you said, and who say I'm not watching anymore as a result of that. And if that's the case, then so be it. But I'm going to try to focus on other things and trying to be more in tune with that situation, have talks with my family about it, and sit back and feel like we need to do something about it, or at least be more mindful of it and respectful of people and listening to people in conversation, because it needs to be had. It's been asked to be had for a long time. And, now we're seeing the impact it has. This is what the leagues are trying to do. They're trying to get the conversation going. And I think that if they're going to try to get the conversation going, then it's on a lot of people, especially as fans of these leagues, to be listening.
He's Kevin Durso, Kevin_Durso on Twitter. Great stuff. Flyers coverage brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Once again, the Flyers game tonight, it has been postponed, and Darren Dreger tweeted about 20 minutes ago, the NHL is working on a Saturday schedule of games now, and the postponement of games is expected to extend through tomorrow, so it does not look like you're going to get Flyers tomorrow either. If you were saying, okay, they'll just move the game to Friday, that doesn't look to be the case either. Pierre LeBrun follows that up by saying, once the players decided not to play tonight, then a further discussion led to all 8 teams wanting the same, hence 2 days of postponement. So that means there were games tonight and there were games tomorrow. The teams that were playing tomorrow also decided they didn't want to play. So now you have 2 days of postponements, which means you might not see a Flyers game until Saturday. That game was a noon start. We'll see if that all changed. So keep it locked here for 97.3 ESPN to see the updates. We're at 1-1, so let's get into that a little bit, Kevin, because the Flyers came out last night. They took a 3-0 lead, and then all of a sudden it evaporated. They end up getting the overtime goal there. So what did you like, and how did the game almost slip away from them?
Well, I think what everybody should have liked was that first period. I think you guys had talked about it. I mentioned it yesterday with you guys. A quick start was necessary, and they got the quick start. And to get it from guys who you need to be contributing in the way that they did. Kevin Hayes gets 2 goals in the first period. I think both of them were in the first 10 minutes of the game, and then Sean Couturier, who hadn't scored a goal in what was considered a playoff game. He had scored in an exhibition against Pittsburgh, but he hadn't scored in any of the playoff games. Just what an individual effort to go and put that power move on Nick Leddy and then drive to the net, get Varlamov out of position and down and out and score that goal. And that felt like a statement. It felt like the moment when the Flyers had complete control of that game. The penalty to Jake Voracek, the delay of game that opens the door for the Islanders there, I thought was critical at that time, because if you're going to make a mistake like that, and it's a very self-inflicted wound, this wasn't a penalty that you take because you're trying to prevent a goal in the moment, or it's a stick infraction where something happens and it just gets away from you. This is a preventable penalty, and he took one that you really shouldn't take, especially in that spot. It opened the door. The Islanders started to smell blood then, and they got a goal in 17 seconds. And for them to take that, I thought what the Flyers did in the third period was good to start with anyway, too. I mean, 7 or 8 minutes into the period, they had only allowed 1 shot on goal, and then all of a sudden the Islanders just kept pushing. And you started to see them get the momentum. That second goal was a huge one, and I agree with some of what you guys were saying earlier about that's probably the one that you look for a bigger save on there with Carter Hart, because that one looked even more preventable. Yes, you look for your goalie to make a big save on that third one too by Pajot because it's off a turnover. You usually look for him to bail out your players there, but you gave it to a scoring guy in the scoring area off of a turnover where you had a little bit of time to try to clear the zone and didn't execute properly. And that's, good teams like the Islanders will make you pay for those mistakes. So that's where it started to really unravel, is that they got away from their game. They didn't play that tight checking, close it out style in the last 10 minutes. And it felt like the Islanders were always on the verge of scoring a goal. And for them to come out in overtime and to feel like they'd gained the momentum back because they were the more energetic team in that 2.5 to 3 minutes that they did play, it's good for them that they did, because I think that if they would have found a way to lose that series, I think I'd be telling you guys the series feels like it's over right then and there. But it doesn't, because they did come away with that win. They're certainly more motivated now because they came with that win and got the result. And you get to start over at 1-1 and play a best of 5 whenever it does start back up. So that's the good part, is that you get to play from 1-1 and see where it goes.
How good did you think Claude Giroux played? Because you look at the stat sheet afterwards, you see the 1 assist, and there's, for some reason in this city, there's a bunch of people that just hate Claude Giroux. They look at the stats, yada, yada, yada. If you watch that game, I mean, I thought he was magnificent. First off, the first Kevin Hayes goal was all because of him in the D zone. And then, not only that, he drove the net after winning the faceoff, which was huge. On Sean Couturier's goal, he had that beautiful little tip pass to Couturier on the far side. And then for the overtime goal, he didn't get a point. But without him winning the battle in the corner, there's no goal at all. So I just thought Claude Giroux was awesome. And he probably won't even get the praise that he deserves because, well, the stat sheet only says 1 point.
Yeah, and I think that the top line in general played better. I think you were looking for that. You looked for Claude Giroux to have a better game. You looked for Sean Couturier to have a better game because in Game 1, they weren't the players that they are supposed to be. And Giroux did a lot of things in subtle ways. Like you mentioned the touch pass there to lead Sean Couturier into that one-on-one, that he gets to put a move on a defenseman and score a goal that way. His presence in the offensive zone on that overtime goal can't be overlooked either. They were, that's how you have to try to score goals. They crashed the net. They got a lot of traffic there. They get a close call with Couturier right there. And one of the things I had mentioned to Josh yesterday after the game was, for a team that had been struggling to score goals, especially some of those top guys, Couturier doesn't get the goal there when it looked like he probably had a great opportunity for it on that rebound. And instead of putting his head to the sky and letting frustration get the better of him in that moment, you stay with the play and you allow yourself to work the puck back to the blue line where Phil Myers is there and you get a shot through traffic and it finds the net, and that's how you win the game. That, to me, you needed a response from those guys, and I think collectively, Drew, Couturier, Kevin Hayes, those are the guys who showed me something in terms of that they are not going to let this, they're not going to let the series get away from them that easily. They're going to try to put their best effort forward, and it's hard to listen to players talk about these guys giving the best effort when you're losing games 4-0. You see it a lot more when you're able to come out and win games, especially with the way they've bounced back constantly. I think that's the 10th time in a row that they've won a game after a loss. And obviously, if you continue to do that, you continue to answer and come back in series and find a way to make it more interesting and make yourself even more of a contender in the series. And I was interested, for whenever Game 3 is now, whether it was tonight like it was supposed to be originally or whether it's Saturday whenever they come back. The bottom line is I'm interested to see if they build on that Game 2, because a lot of times when they've lost a game, they don't just win the next one. They turn it into a small winning streak of some kind, whether they win 2 in a row or whether they win 3 in a row. And I'd like to see what the momentum is from that Game 2 win, because if they can win the next one for sure, but what if they take this and win the next 2 as a result of that? Now you're up in the series in a commanding way, and that could be a real game changer just because of the way that you finished off that Game 2.
It's interesting you brought up putting your head up after maybe missing a goal. I didn't know if that was a shot at Travis Konechny or not. He's done that a couple times in this series. I want to get your thoughts on that. But also, that hit from Niskanen on Johnston. Normally when a team throws a hit, you think that would energize the Flyers on the bench. Yeah, here we go, boys, get them all juiced up. It almost felt like that hit energized the Islanders.
It does to an effect, because I think that's your big guy and that's your tough guy, and you're trying to get energy from that. And he was trying to throw a hit himself too, I think at times, and you've got to understand that sometimes whenever there's that little bit of frustration that sets in too, I mean, they didn't like the hit. And sometimes that's the motivator. It's interesting how the ebb and flow of hockey games works, and it's especially that way in the playoffs. So I think that plays a factor as well, in terms of now they think they've really got us in a spot, because they're not only beating us on the scoreboard, but they're hitting us, and they think that they've got us where they want us. And instead, the Islanders take that and turn the momentum the other direction, keep pushing and keep trying to get back into the game. And it did work in their favor. I don't know that it was as big of a turning point as the power play that they had that got them on the board, or even just trying to open up the ice a little bit the way they did in that third period. When you get transition plays, and the Flyers had a 3-on-2 that looked promising and didn't go anywhere other than a centering pass that hit off of the pad of Thomas Greiss and went right back into the slot and sent the Islanders the other way. But when you get into that transition game, you open up opportunities like that going the other way, and the Islanders cashed in on that there too. And you had just under 9 minutes to go in the game with time to tie it up, and really for the rest of that period, it looked like the team was, I said to Josh yesterday, Andrew, you could have had 4 goals yesterday the way he played, and he nearly had one in the third period that would have tied the game anyway and hit the post. So they were coming in waves from pretty much that midpoint of the third period on, and a lot of it just has to do with getting one chance, and that can turn the momentum.
He's Kevin Durso. Game 3, we don't know when it will be, but it will not be tonight and it will not be tomorrow, so possibly Saturday, Game 3. It's all tied up 1-1, and we would anticipate now that Carter Hart will definitively be in the net. Did you have any inclination on who would have been in goal today?
We didn't have any idea of who exactly was getting the start, but my guess was going to be, and I had him listed as my projected starter, was Brian Elliott, because of the fact that I think the way, and I said it was, for me, it was the way the third period went. If the Flyers closed out that game and win 3-1, and it's an even series in that sense, then I think you might go back to Carter Hart, because he didn't face that wave of pressure at the end, or he looked good in that wave of pressure at the end, and instead he gave up 2 goals in the final 10 minutes and didn't know. I think he faced 1 shot in the overtime, so I don't feel like there was as much on him in overtime to feel like he gains, not to say he doesn't gain his confidence back, but just I didn't like how much extra work he had in that last part of the third period. And I think he would have gone with the fresher body in that sense and put some trust in Brian Elliott and hope that also had an effect on the rest of the team in terms of energizing them to play even better in front of him. And now I think you can, obviously, you change all of that, because if you're not playing for a couple of days, then Carter Hart's going to be ready to go, and you can right back to him in Game 3, no question about it, because you're going to roll with him. I think that's been apparent. And there really was no question on the Islanders side either. I think that when they got Varlamov out of there in the first period, that wasn't just a down 3-0 move. That was also a preserve him for the next day move. So I think that that's who would have started as well. And I think now both teams know who they're starting when everything resumes on Saturday.
All right. And if everything resumes on Saturday, you'll hear it here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin Durso will have more and has more at 973ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Flyers coverage brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250.